to welcome you all here today to the Hearings Committee deliberations. I declare the meeting open and we'll begin with the karaka. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Hearings Committee to deliberate on the dangerous, affected and insanitary buildings policy and the dog policy and dog control bylaw. The committee will be making recommendations to the council meeting on the 14th of May on both policies. I'd like to just now for the panel members to introduce themselves, starting.
Kia ora, ko tau Hayes Kikoingoa. I'm the rep for Rangita, iwi rep for Rangita.
Gary Caffel, Mayor.
Craig Bowyer, Chair, Hearings Committee.
David Holmes, Councillor.
Kia ora, Robin Kortongagoa, iwi rep for Masterton.
And just for the record, I'd like for the other attendees to record their names.
Kia ora, ko Karen Yates Aho, I'm the General Manager for Strategy and Development.
Kia ora, Matt Bolton, I'm the Chief Advisor.
Kia ora, Terry Mulligan, Environmental Services Manager.
Kia ora, Corin Haynes, Taku Ingoa, General Manager Community.
Kia ora, Shane Tane, Building and Services Manager.
Kia ora, Sophie Bradley, Policy Advisor. Kia ora, Harriet Kennedy, Governance Team Leader.
Thank you for that. And we're getting. Please let me know if anyone would like to leave the meeting early. And just a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed. First of all, I'd like to call on members to declare any conflicts of interest they may have in relation to items on the agenda. No conflicts of interest. Item 2, apologies. I'd like to move the motion that the Hearings Committee accepts the apology for non-attendance from Councillor Galena. Do I have a seconder? Gary. I'd like to put the motion forward. Motion that has been moved and seconded. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Now up to item 3.1, which is reports for decision. Confirmation of the minutes. First of all, we want to confirm the minutes of the hearing held on the 9th of April 2025 as a true and correct record of the meeting.
I'll move that.
Chair. Okay, Gary.
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
All those in favour say aye. Aye. The motion is carried. Item 4.1, dangerous, affected and sanitary buildings policy deliberations report. The next item on the agenda is the next item on the agenda. I'll hand over to the Policy Advisor, Sophie Bradley, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair, Tēnā koe te committee. My name is Sophie Bradley, Policy Advisor, looking after the dangerous, affected and unsanitary buildings policy today. Today you have the opportunity to consider our proposed changes to the policy following consultation in February and March this year, where we received 15 submissions on the policy. 4 submitters provided specific feedback on the policy, and those key suggestions were updates to clarify when the policy applies under Section 124 notices to buildings designated in emergency areas, extending coverage of the policy to earthquake-prone buildings that have characteristics that make it dangerous, affected or insanitary, independent of and unrelated to the characteristics that make it earthquake-prone, and some commentary around regarding Māori consultation. So we respond to these comments in the report, in the table in the report on the 4th page, and we propose only one amendment to the policy going forward. We propose amendment to on page 7 of the policy to better articulate how notices for dangerous, affected or unsanitary buildings, section 124 notices, apply in designated emergency areas made under Part 2, Subpart 6b. The proposed amendment makes it clear that section 124 notices under the Building Act cannot be made in a designated area. Notices issued prior to designation continue to apply in certain circumstances. The proposed change could be anticipated from the statement of proposal, and no further consultation with the community is therefore required. To clarify what a section 124 notices is, those are the notices that council can make for a building owner to remedy any dangerous or unsanitary aspects of their building, and also council may take action also to remedy. But what we're saying there is that under an emergency declaration that we're not going to be issuing any new notices. However, if we issued notices before the emergency designation was in place, they will continue to be applied, but they may be hard for us to actually enforce during that period. So that's the intent of that clarifying section on page 7 of the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Are there any questions to the report?
Sophie, just to probably needs to. It interests me that earthquake-prone buildings aren't part of the scope of this policy, when in actual fact you would think that they would be part of the dangerous side of the policy. But obviously, from what you're saying here, the direction from MBIE is that the earthquake-prone buildings don't have to be part of this. And so that's correct, is that right?
That is correct. Yep. So that MB has made it really clear to us that the earthquake-prone buildings have their own provisions within the Act that they follow, and that the policy does not need to consider those within the scope of this policy. However, as we've made it clear in the report, that buildings that are earthquake-prone or damaged can be deemed as dangerous, affected or unsanitary for reasons other than their earthquake-prone status or characteristics. A notice can be issued, but it cannot require the building owner to strengthen their building. This is set under the other clauses in the Act around earthquake-prone buildings. So we can't use that section to get them to remedy their earthquake-prone status, because I think it's a quicker turnaround for the section 124 notices, whereas the earthquake-prone building sections, it gives them a longer period to remedy those issues around with the building. Is that correct, Shane?
That's correct.
So what you're basically saying is the earthquake-prone side of the building is part of another policy?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Holmes?
When it comes to making a decision, Sophie, about these buildings, what's the qualification of the person that makes those decisions? Is it a civil engineer? Is it what sort of person does it, Shane? I'm interested to know.
Hand it over to Shane as he makes those decisions.
Yep.
So it's you?
Probably.
Okay.
So the policy actually lays down quite a lot of criteria to kind of look at to make that decision. It'll probably be more, we're doing, I suppose we have a more passive type policy rather than proactive policy. So we're not going out there looking for dangerous buildings. But if we had someone say, hey, we think this is dangerous, then we would go and take a look. And then we'd look at the policy saying, is there an immediate danger to people as a result of that building? And if there was immediate danger, then it'd likely be one of my officers, and they'd likely come to me, and then I would talk with them to try and make the decision of whether it's dangerous and sanitary. There would also be a discussion then with Karen and Kim, because it's actually the warrant for that actually has to be issued off the Chief Executive. So it would be not just me or the officer, it would actually be consulted right up to Kim's level, basically.
So it's not a highly paid consultant that's brought in to make that decision?
We may do if we thought we needed to. So if it's a specific engineering issue, I don't know if someone's concerned about a facade on a building that it looked like it was come loose or not attached properly, then we would likely we'd go and have a look, and if we thought we need to get further information, we'd go and engage an engineer and say, you need to come and have a look at this for us. So we'd do that. If it was heritage, then also we've got to consult with them as part of the process to say, we may need to do something with this. So just the relevant discipline we'd engage to get a second opinion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Another further question?
Roughly, how many buildings would we have that are considered to be dangerous, affected or unsanitary? How many?
In Masterton?
Yep.
0 at this point.
0 at this point?
Because it's about immediate danger and imminent loss of life.
Yep.
So we don't consider that we have any of those that we're aware of in our district at this point.
Oh, it's good news.
Yeah. But if someone come to us, then we'd do that, apply the policy and go, does it meet that threshold, and deal with it. The 124 process is, I suppose, an urgent process, and we'd respond within hours to a claim that something's possibly dangerous.
So that would come into effect, say if a building was half destroyed by fire or something like that, we would go back and look at that building?
We would be, the onus goes back to the owner in the first instance to probably talk with their insurer, but we would be looking at it from a public point of view. Is the public safe in and around this building? If they're using it, then yes, we'd have to go that next level. Can they actually use it safely? Are the systems in the building still working or not? That would alert to any danger. So we'd have to go down that process. But our first, like the fires in the churches, our first reaction to that was, are the public able to be safe within the vicinity of those buildings? Forgetting about the use of the building, that kind of becomes secondary after that point, and that would be the next step. Well, can it be done safely? We kind of put that back to the building owner in the first instance to work with the insurer to say, well, what do we need to do with this thing? And they would then elect to engage with us or not from that point.
Okay. Any other questions? You happy with that? Right, thank you for that, team. We'll now turn to the recommendations in the report. And the recommendations are, and I'll read them out individually, that the Hearings Committee, 1, notes that the committee was provided with a full set of submissions on the dangerous, affected and unsanitary buildings policy on the 9th of April 2025. 2, notes that 15 submissions were received on the policy. 3, considers the community feedback received and advice from staff. 4, notes staff recommended a minor amendment to the interaction with other emergency provisions of the Act section of the policy for clarification purposes. And 5, recommends to Council that the dangerous, affected and unsanitary buildings policy is adopted with one minor change following consultation. I will now move the motion being the recommendation in the officer's report. Do I have a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Holmes. The motion is now open for debate. Does anyone would like to speak to this? I'll just add in there. I'd like to think this policy's been well thought through, and I think it's been good you've taken some notice of the feedback that has come through and made, well, just a minor adjustment. I think it adds a bit of clarification, and so going forward, I think this will work very well. Okay. I'd now like to put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. The final item on the agenda is the report relating to the dog policy and the control of dogs bylaw. I'll hand over to Karen Yates to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. It's the next stage in the process of the policy and the bylaw, and so we're deliberating on the responses from the public on the statement of proposal for both of those documents, and we've provided some advice within the report in response to the feedback received from submitters. So we had 134 submissions on the policy and the bylaw. The majority, 69 of those submitters, supported making the changes that were proposed. They set out in the recommendations the number of proposals. In recommendation 3, there were 8 specific proposals. So the majority supported those in their entirety and supported adopting the policy and the bylaw, and then there's a breakdown within the report of each of the support around each of those proposals. The submitters provided some other comments in relation to other matters, and the report there sets out what those additional matters were. So I'll just take quickly through those. So there were support for allowing dogs within the CBD. Officers responded that we consider at the moment that there is an appropriate balance of rights and freedoms with protecting the bird life and allowing dogs to be exercised. We have made a suggestion that we can monitor that proposal through our officers. And if we do consider it an issue outside of that current ban timing, then we can either reconsult, because we would need to reconsult on that additional proposal, and report back to council through the annual plan process, or we can have a separate consultation on that, but those are proposals that we would need to have a separate consultation on. So that was allowing dogs in the CBD, making Henley Lake on leash rather than off leash, apart from those protected areas at a particular time. There was a suggestion around the Reynolds Street Reserve that shouldn't be off leash because there were some concerns around danger due to the proximity of the road, and officers again didn't deem that to be an issue at the moment, but we can monitor that. There was some support for changes to criteria for responsible dog ownership. Again, officers considered that the current proposals are a balance of rights. Some submitters wanted, particularly like the property areas, some supported making the property more secure, and some supported making it less secure for those requirements for that responsible dog ownership status. There were also some comments around setting fees and welfare concerns and breed-specific issues that were outside of the current review. Two sets of feedback that officers have taken on board and have responded with some amendments to the dog policy and bylaw. The first one was the proposals around clarifying that exercising dogs alongside motor vehicles means that you are not in control of your dog, which you are required to be. There were some issues around what do we mean by a motor vehicle, and I know that was part of the discussions as part of the hearings, and so what officers have proposed an amendment there to clarify, putting some guidance in with the definition of what a motor vehicle is. Basically, it's not something that's controlled by pedestrians, so it's either a vehicle drawn or propelled vehicle or machine as it's defined, so that's not bicycles, skateboards, skates. Mobility scooters, low-powered e-bikes and scooters are also exempt, and that's following NZTA guidance. So we make reference to that NZTA guidance in case there are. We've only recently, of course, had motorised skateboards and scooters, so for new technology coming up, we're not proposing to review this for another 10 years, so there might be something coming up, so we are going to rely on what the NZTA guidance will be in the future around any new and novel motor vehicles. The other proposal that we have followed up with was around who exercises the discretion to waive the surrender fee and on what basis do we exercise that discretion. So we have included additional factors for the environmental team to take into consideration when they decide whether they will waive that surrender fee, and that's looking at the history of the dog and the owner, the risk posed, and any actions taken to rehome the dog before we exercise that discretion. So on the basis of the submissions and our response to those submissions, officers are recommending that the committee agrees the proposed changes that we've outlined. We also recommend in recommendation 4 that the committee recommends to council that it makes the determinations which are required under the Local Government Act. So with a bylaw, it is a regulatory instrument, criminal offences if you do contravene the bylaw. So we have to be really clear and really careful that the bylaw is needed. That's the most appropriate way of dealing with balancing these rights and freedoms that we're trying to balance through the bylaw and the policy. And then if a bylaw is needed, that the proposed form of the bylaw is the most appropriate form. And then we have to identify whether the bylaw has any implications for the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. So you'll know that there are rights and freedoms that are protected under the Bill of Rights Act. One of those is the freedom of movement. We are, through the bylaw, restricting people's movement when they have dogs, but we consider that that restriction under the Bill of Rights is reasonable and justifiable, particularly taking into consideration the purpose of the bylaw and the purpose of the policy, which is of course to balance those rights, so that we consider that so the Bill of Rights Act allows restrictions on freedoms as long as they are reasonable and justifiable in a democratic society, and we believe that we meet with this proposed bylaw those conditions. So just taking you through those, because those are something that we do need to carefully consider. And we have proposed that that you do make those the recommendation that the council makes those determinations when it goes forward. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Karen?
Excuse me. One of the submitters mentioned about the Riversdale, the northern part of the Riversdale. He also pointed out the fact that that area where the bird's nest is all fenced off for the bird life. You're aware of that? Have you rethought that at all? Or?
As I say, in the report, we did consider all the feedback provided, but we felt that the protection of the birds and that the area there, that was the appropriate area that we had proposed.
And the other one was question I had was to do with the vehicles and dogs. That's only urban, isn't it? It's not rural. You can't stop a farmer.
No, and it doesn't apply specifically. The bylaw doesn't apply to working dogs, so we know that that's necessary. Sorry, Terry has something to add.
Sorry, I think it does apply to rural, but it's about exercising the dog,
That's
not
right.
working the dog.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different.
Yes, sorry, that's a good clarification.
Yeah.
So it does apply, but not to working dogs.
Yeah, they get plenty of exercise.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Karen. Around dogs in the CBD, if a cafe in the CBD wanted to become dog friendly to possibly attract different types of customers, or is there a process they could apply for it, or is the ban just a blanket ban?
It is a blanket ban, and that was the comments, the feedback around, should we move more as a CBD, as a district, to being more dog friendly. It was a proposal by a small number of submitters, and we, with officers, considered that actually maintaining that ban, because it was a specific issue that had arisen some years ago around particular types of dogs that were in the CBD, and it was felt that it was appropriate to do that, and we still feel it's appropriate to do that. However, that could be one of those matters if we would need to reconsult, because it was not raised by us in the statement proposal but raised by submitters, and so we would need to go back to the community to say, do you specifically want to raise the to remove this ban, but we could do that if there was public sentiment or support around the table to do that at a later date. But at the moment, we felt that actually it was a small number of submitters, and actually it's still appropriate to do so.
Has there been any request from a business for that we know of?
We're not aware of, no, not through the
So
submitters.
that tidies that up.
Yeah.
There's been no request there.
No.
Yeah, that tidies up nicely. Okay, so we'll now turn the recommendations.
I've got a question.
Sorry, Councillor.
On the requirement to neuter an uncontrolled dog, an uncontrolled dog, I guess this is a dog that's roaming. How do you differentiate between a dog that just escapes a property and runs around town, which we, in our area, we have a number of them that have done that, just friendly dogs, but they've managed to get out and they run around. They're not in any trouble to anybody. So would they be counted as, if somebody picked them up, would they be counted as uncontrolled dogs?
Yes, they would, because nobody is in control of them while they're out roaming.
So what we're saying is those sort of dogs got out of their property twice, they'd be neutered. Even though they just got out because they were being a bit mischievous. I find that, yeah, it's an interesting. So the other part on this, I couldn't help but agree on the same thing. It said that some people suggested that owners of chronic roaming dogs need stricter consequences, such as euthanasia. Is that the owners have been euthanized? I read that like, because I'm a great one, because I believe that if a dog is misbehaved, it's often the owner's fault because they haven't been trained properly. And I sort of read that and thought, that's not a bad idea. You sort of put the owner down rather than the dog. It probably needs a wee bit of look at that wording.
We'll take those comments on board, thank you.
And I've got one last question. So the infringement fees, and please correct me if I'm totally off base here, we don't really have the ability to adjust them much. Are they set by the LGA?
They're set in the Dog Control Act.
Yeah, because it comes through in one of the themes that people want stricter penalties, and that's fairly hard for us to raise those fees, considering it's in the Act, isn't it? Yeah. So
The infringement fees are set.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Thank you for that. Thank you, Karen. Now, the recommendations in the officer's report are, and please bear with me, this is quite a long document, and my voice may get quite monotonous at times, okay? But I'll go through them slowly and read them out. Okay. The recommendations are, number 1, notes that the Hearings Committee was provided with the full set of submissions on the dog policy and dog control of dogs bylaw as part of the hearings report on the 9th of April 2025 meeting. Number 2, considers the community feedback received and advice from staff. 3, agrees to the key proposed changes to the dog policy in attachment 1 and control of dogs bylaw attachment 2. They are 1, proposal 1, designate Taranaki Street Park as off-leash. 2, proposal 2, designate the Castle Point Reef area as prohibited. Proposal 3, designate the northern end and Motuwharakari stream mouth at Riversdale Beach as on-leash. Proposal 4, introduce a requirement to neuter an uncontrolled dog. Proposal 5, clarify that exercising dogs alongside a moving vehicle means the owner is not in control of their dog. Proposal 6, implement a process to enable dog owners to request the removal of a menacing dog by deed classification. Proposal 7, provide discretion for the Council to waive surrendering fees in exceptional circumstances. Proposal 8, clarify responsible dog owner status for multiple dog ownership, moving house and exceptions for neutering. Item 4 in this, recommends that Council A, determines that in accordance with section 155 of the Local Government Act 2002, a bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the perceived problems identified. B, determines that in accordance with section 155 Part 2, Part A of the LGA, the bylaw is the most appropriate form of bylaw. C, determines that in accordance with sections 155(2) Part B and 3 of the LGA, the bylaw gives rise to implications for the freedom of movement under section 18 of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990, but the limits to that right are reasonable and demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society in accordance with Section 5 of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. D. Adopts the dog policy, attachment 1, and control of dogs bylaw, attachment 2. 5. Notes that, subject to adoption by Council, the dog policy and control of dogs bylaw would take effect from the 1st of June 2025. I will now move the motion, being the recommendations in the report. Is there a seconder? Councillor Holmes, thank you. The motion is now up for debate. Is there anything? Mayor Caffel?
Mr Chair, to go back to the discussion on the dogs in the CBD, I personally would like to see that as part of our 26-27 annual plan consultation process. It may not be that the shops or any of the shops so far have asked for permission for that to happen, but I personally, as Mayor, have had a number of people come to me, particularly in the Thursday sessions that I hold uptown. A number of ratepayers come and say to me that they believe that would be a really good idea, and they often cite other towns in New Zealand and overseas as allowing dogs in town without any problems. So I would like to see that being part of our annual plan consultation process. I don't think that it needs to be part of any recommendation, but I'd just like to note that that would be,
Can't be, that would have to be.
We can put that in now.
Okay. So you'd like an amendment?
Well,
Amendment
if
that is-
it
that is-
takes an amendment, I would like to move an amendment that we consult through our 26-27 annual plan process on whether people believe dogs should be allowed in the CBD. I do believe it's got to the point where there is enough interest in that debate that it would be worth consultation.
I'd support that process.
Yeah, and I would be honest with you, I would support the process too.
Yeah.
So, we'll make an amendment?
So we can add in proposal 9.
Okay, I'm more than happy to do that.
What would be the wording?
That recommends to council to consult with the community on the ban on dogs in the CBD as part of the annual plan 2026-7 process.
I'll move that.
Have we got that up
Does that make
on
sense,
screen
Harry?
so I can possibly read that?
Sorry, just a sec.
Re-looking at the
I'd make clear on saying that I would need to think it through a bit more myself. I'm not saying that I necessarily support that, but I think it's worth discussion.
It's worth a debate. It's worth a-
Okay, so we can add, then maybe it's better as a separate. So we can add it on to, actually, let's add it on to E, 4E. And then, so that's recommends that council considers
Considers dogs within the CBD.
Considers proposal 2, and then what I said before.
Yeah.
Because then that just means it comes back to council next time.
Yep. Thank you.
subject to rules and regulations.
Oh, it's not coming up.
There was one other thing that I'd like to bring up too, was regarding the working dogs, the number of, there was something about the number of working dogs that could be charged. Some people would propose 0 fees for any working dog after the first is registered, because working dogs are tools of the trade. I mean, I think there's some relevance in that comment, and I'm just wondering, what is... How difficult would it be to play a numbers game here and say, you know, whether you had more than one dog or two dogs or three dogs or whatever? How difficult would that be?
All dogs are required to be registered. So some other councils have like a set fee for 10 or more dogs, like 10 or more dog, up to 10 dogs. There's a set fee and then there's a cost after that. But every dog is required to be registered.
So you're talking about fees?
Yeah, I am really. I'm talking about working dogs, though. They're treated the same as...
No. We don't differentiate in the fees either. We have rural dogs or we have urban dogs.
Can you just make that a little bit bigger?
You pay a fee for the first dog, don't you? Full fee for the first dog, and then the others are discounted.
Yes, the others are heavily discounted in the rural area.
One of my concerns is that there's a lot of young people on the farms training to be shepherds now, and it's actually quite an expense for them to register their dogs. Could we make a number, this is only a suggestion, number per farm, or you could perhaps do it that way?
You'd end up with...
I know it's common, just on one discussion, because the other thing is too, some of these farmers also have pig dogs, which are registered as well. So it does get, it could be quite messy.
You would have to have it just as specific to the owner, the registered owner, if anything was going to happen. You know, to a farm, you know, and we see it in various other places where someone might say, well, actually, I work for Joe Bloggs, and so I want to get the discounted fee under him, whereas they may be working for Robert Smith.
Well, a lot of them are itinerant, work on lots of farms too.
Yeah.
So.
We often find that if they're employed, the farm owner will register the working dogs and then likely have that as a tax deductible expense.
So obviously fees are outside of these proposals, but if you want officers to report to council on that matter.
Do you believe there's value in
Yes, I do.
further in?
No, I just think probably it's a good idea
Joe?
if we just look at it. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
We could put some sort of amendment in there with regards to farm dogs.
Can I clarify, is that working dogs or rural dogs?
No, working farm working dogs.
Okay,
Yeah.
just farm working dogs.
And you're looking at a bar that after a certain amount there is a discount, or...
Well, there is a discount now. You only pay full price for one, and then the others are discounted. But we just look at the whole process. I think would be better.
So officers can take that on board and build that into the process for next year's fee setting.
Yeah.
Be happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we don't
think
need
we
to
need
move
to-
anything
no,
in. We
it's
just something to look at for the fees proposal next year.
There's one thing, Mr. Chair. We're a bit concerned about these disqualified dogs, and how many times does an owner who's got a disqualified dog, how many times are they allowed to re-register them and own them? I'm wondering if we shouldn't actually, at some stage, disqualify the owner.
So the owner is the disqualified owner. That's set in legislation. It says that after 3 infringements within a 24-month period, we must disqualify the owner. There is exceptions where the owner may be probationised, which means then that they don't have to not own a dog. They can only own the dog that they have registered at the time and cannot get any more. But a disqualified owner is disqualified for 5 years of not owning a dog.
And that's your discretion?
That is set in legislation.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
What do you want to change? Yes, yeah, I think you happy with that wording?
So can I just recommend, sorry Harriet?
Where would you like to put it in the resolution? Would you like to make it a new...
4E.
4E, so it's part of the recommendations to council.
Yep, I'm
but it recommends to council to consider a proposal to consult with the community.
You consider, the word consider needs to be.
Considers a, yeah, to consider a proposal to consult. Yeah.
Just a point of clarification around dogs and banning of dogs in the CBD. Does that include banning, seeing eye dogs and dogs like that?
No. Well, we had a bit of clarification around that during the hearings process. No, at no stage would I ever want to ban any of these dogs.
There is another thing I'd like to bring up in the discussion, is that after our last meeting there was headlines through the press which might have suggested to people that we have this massive problem with badly behaved dogs and Masterton. And I'd just like some clarification from Terry that, you know, in terms of other places and in terms of other towns, my impression is that we do pretty well, and that actually our level of misbehaved dogs is not extremely high at all. And I'd just like to get some, because the headlines were there as if Masterton was some bad part of New Zealand for dogs. But would it be fair to say that that's not a good representation of the town?
Most of our owners are fantastic dog owners. We were not aware of those allegations, and we have not had any notification of those allegations made either before or after that meeting either. We weren't aware of any of those issues, which would be great if we had been, if we are notified of issues, then we will follow up. But most of our dog owners are absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we're slightly off piste here. We'll go back to recommendations and we'll open it up for a bit of debate after that. Hey? So, Gary, you've moved, and under the recommendations, we now have 4E, recommends to council to consider a proposal to consult with the community on the ban of dogs in the CBD as part of the 2026-2027 annual plan process.
Yep.
You've moved that. We have a seconder. Councillor Holmes. Yeah, so just to reiterate, that is added into what I previously read out, and it encompasses everything. Okay. So we would, I will now move the motion, being the recommendation of the officer's report. Do I have a seconder for those motions? Councillor Holmes. Harriet, sorry.
Did you want to debate the motion? Debate this one, all of them. This one.
Okay. So is there any debate on the motion that has been moved? No debate. Thank you for that. We'll go back to, I'd like to move the motions as previously. Councillor Holmes has seconded that. All those in favour? Aye. No one against? That's right. I thought we... Pardon? Yeah, I thought we... Okay, so the motion is carried. We'll now conclude the meeting with a...
You need to now put that back into the original motion.
Yeah, I think it was added in. It was added in and it was agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're happy. Process has been followed.
Yeah. That's been added in, and then everybody's just voted on the entirety of it with that added in.
Yeah.
All three of us.
Okay. We'll now conclude the meeting with a closing karakia. Ki mutu amatu mahi o tene wā, minakiti mai mātou katoa, o mātou